Texas's spring game is officially canceled, as Sark announced, but as Josh Pate always says, we don't subscribe to the word off-season around here at Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Welcome back to the show, Longhorn fans. I am your host, Michael Wein from Houston, Texas, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-host, Nixon from Austin, Texas. For those of you wondering, we are recording this Saturday, February 22nd in the afternoon. But if you are listening to this, you will be hearing it on Wednesday, the 26th, as that will be when it is released. On today's show, Emmy and I will react to where Todd McShay has 3 Longhorns going in his first mock draft of draft season. We will also dive into some very intriguing team offseason intel, some good and some not so great. And we'll give our analysis on the latest changes to Texas's coaching staff that Steve Sarkisian has been working on. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel as we have plentiful NFL draft content on the way in the coming weeks and months, and tons of Longhorn content just like this. So let's go ahead and jump into this. But before we do that, Emmy Nixon, how are you
good,
on this Saturday?
I just went and tried a new place like 30 minutes from me. It's like a specialty cinnamon rolls place. They have like a peach cobbler cinnamon roll and like a like churro cinnamon roll and a bunch of other stuff. So that was pretty good.
I love cinnamon rolls, and I absolutely love churros. Usually when I go to a Mexican restaurant or a Tex-Mex restaurant that has churros, I will get churros. Combining a churro and a cinnamon roll together, though, that sounds like something that I want this afternoon on a cold and rainy day in Houston, Texas.
Yeah,
Is it's still cold and yucky in Austin?
My girlfriend slipped and fell down the stairs earlier today. The ice was just like all up on we were walking down the stairs from her apartment, and the ice was just all up on each step of the staircase, and she just went just straight down. Yeah.
That's not good. Hopefully she is okay. And hopefully that doesn't happen to me. It's not icy here, but it's just like cold and rainy, which is like the worst weather in my opinion. And Texas baseball is playing in this weather somehow. So they're taking on Dartmouth for a 3-game weekend series. We aren't going to be talking about any baseball today, but we're going to try to keep it all football. But they did win yesterday against Dartmouth in the same cold and rainy weather, and they're playing Dartmouth today and tomorrow. At least tomorrow is scheduled. We'll see if it holds with the weather. But let's go ahead and jump into the football content for today. Do you want to start with, let's start with this mock draft. I started listening to Todd McShay's draft show. You can find it on YouTube. I'm sure it's on Apple, Spotify, because I think he does some good draft content. And there's tons of good draft content that you can find. I mean, if you're draft geeks like us, you can find that franchise guy. You can find what's the one? Yep. I mean, there's lots of good stuff out there. Now, this mock draft, his newsletter is new. It's behind a $4 paywall, so I'm not going to officially share the entire mock draft on the screen, just out of respect for it being behind a paywall. But there are 3 Longhorns, the same 3 Longhorns that we reacted to in last week's mock draft, going in this mock draft, just to different destinations. So I thought it would be fun to discuss. So let's start out with Todd McShay's first Longhorn off the board in his mock draft 1.0, and that is Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle for the Longhorns. But instead of going to the Chicago Bears, like our friend Daniel Jeremiah had him last week, Todd McShay has Kelvin Banks going to the San Francisco 49ers, 1 pick later at number 11. Emmy Nixon, your thoughts?
I like this pick a lot. If he falls to here, which I'm not really sure. I think it just depends on how the NFL views Armand Membu and Will Campbell and guys like that. But if he's available here, I think you plug him in at right tackle and you feel pretty good about that moving forward. I mean, if anything, if you're feeling okay at right tackle for now, then maybe you just have him in there at guard for the time being, and then moving out to tackle like in a couple years. But either way, I think he'll give you really good offensive line play at whatever position you put him at. So I think it's the right move to go with offensive line for the Niners, I think. Like, they really need to replenish their offensive and defensive lines.
I expect the 49ers to target help on the offensive line, the interior defensive line, possibly cornerback and edge in free agency and in the draft. We'll see what they do at the receiver position. There are the Deebo Samuel trade rumors out there. But I love this pick. Maybe even more so than I like the Bears pick, and I love that pick as well. If you're going to invest tons of money into Brock Purdy, then you also have to start improving this offensive line. It's absolutely required to keep Brock Purdy upright and healthy. If you're going to invest that much money, you got to have the requisite offensive line. They've struggled to build the offensive line outside of Trent Williams, who's still at left tackle and will be entering age 37 season next year. But I think this pick would fit fantastic for a couple reasons. Number one, Kelvin Banks can help you in the near and distant future. You can start him out at right tackle, and he'd be an immediate upgrade to what you probably already have on the roster. And then in 1 or 2 years, once Trent Williams is retired, you can move him to left tackle. And he also has the versatility to play guard if you want to start him out at guard for whatever reason. But I think it's the perfect plan if he's available, or one of these tackles is available, say a Will Campbell, who, I'll spoil it, Todd McShay has Will Campbell going one pick earlier at number 10 to the Chicago Bears. So the Bears still get an offensive tackle. It's just not Kelvin Banks in this mock. I think he offer an immediate upgrade on the right side of their offensive line, which they need. And I think he's an excellent fit in Kyle Shanahan's outside zone running scheme because for the majority of his career at Texas, that's what he's been running. And he's been very successful run blocking in this scheme. He's very familiar with it already. I think he'd be a fantastic plug and play in this running scheme. So I'm interested to see what he weighs. I'm interested to see his official height and his wingspan at the combine. But I feel like the more I look into different mock drafts, this is around the range that Kelvin Banks is falling. The Bears, the 49ers, kind of in the latter half of the top 10 to like top 15 is kind of where I see him going. We'll see if he's there, but I think it's a great fit for many reasons.
And I have Spot Track pulled up right here, and they're only investing just under 15% of their total cap into the offensive line. So they really haven't, outside of Trent Williams, who's one of the highest paid tackles in football, outside of him, they haven't invested much of anything into this offensive line since losing McGlinchey and losing Banks, their guard, and losing some of those other guys to free agency. So it's time to get this group back on track.
Yeah, it could use an injection of youth on the offensive line, and Kelvin Banks would provide that. Let's move on to the next Longhorn off the board. And again, same Longhorn we talked about in last week's episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports with Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft 2.0. This time, though, Jahdae Barron is coming off the board a little earlier at number 14 to the Indianapolis Colts. Nixon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think with the Colts, they've spent years and years kind of maintaining their flexibility in free agency, trying to maintain a certain, like a requisite amount of cap space. But at some point, you're going to have to throw your chips in and go all in. And I think Jahdae Barron is a great piece in being able to do that. Because you start him at outside corner. You feel great about that. I think he would immediately be a good to great corner from day one. Say your slot corner goes down, you move him there. Your safety goes down, you move him there. And he would do all of those positions at a good to great level. So there's just so much value to that. And honestly, with what I've been seeing lately, his stock is just going to go up and up. So by the time the draft comes around, there's a chance he's not even going to get to this pick.
Todd McShay, who has been in the draft industry for decades and was formerly at ESPN with Mel Kiper. He's pretty well sourced, or at least I believe he is, and he says Jahdae Barron's going to be a top 15 pick from what he's hearing around the league. I think the Colts, if they're not going to go defensive back here, I think you'll probably see them possibly go tight end. I think you could see Tyler. I don't know that Tyler Warren's going to fall this far. I think Tyler Warren's going in the top 10. But if Colston Loveland is here out of Michigan, this has been a popular destination for him in lots of mock drafts. I think you could see them go tight end if one of the two best tight ends in the draft is available. I think a smart play would probably be to beef up the edge position and the interior of the defensive line because they were bad. They were a bad run defense team, but they were also not so great in the secondary. So either way you go, strengthening the defense, I think, is a good strategy. They could go Colston Loveland once again, but I think Barron, whose stock is going to continue to rise as we get closer and we go through the combine next week, through his pro day, they really need a playmaker on the back end of their defense. And I think Barron can provide that. He can provide it at cornerback, and he can line up in the nickel if you need help there. He's a very smart, intellectual player. He's good deep in coverage. He can make plays, as he showed his senior tape, fifth-year senior tape at Texas. Very consistent. I like the pick. Would I maybe look at the board and see if I could get, a really good edge or an interior defensive lineman or maybe even interior offensive lineman, possibly? But Jahdae Barron at number 14, I think, is really good value because of his versatility. Same thing we talked about with the Bengals last week. His stock is definitely rising, for sure. Okay, the last Longhorn going in Todd McShay's first mock draft is, again, the same trio of Longhorns we talked about last week. But this time, instead of going to the Buffalo Bills at the 30th pick, Matthew Golden ends up with the Washington Commanders at the 29th pick.
Yeah, this
Nixon,
is something I even thought about when reacting to that prior mock draft. This pick kind of feels like one of my favorite fits of this entire draft class, and that's saying a lot. So, for one, I think he pairs very well alongside Terry McLaurin. I think their skill sets complement each other. McLaurin, I wouldn't call him a burner either, but I think they do different things really well. I think McLaurin can win downfield at an extremely high level. I think his special trait, I think, is just his ball skills, tracking the deep ball. And, of course, last year he showed a lot of run after catch ability as well. But those two things are his main, I guess, superpowers, if you will. For Golden, it's the catch radius in the short to intermediate part of the field. He's going to win a lot of those crossing routes. He's going to win a lot of those digs and routes to 10 to 20-yard range. And I think Daniels also likes to throw to that part of the field quite a bit as well. So This is a fantastic pick to me.
I agree. I was thinking about it last night. The number one thing here is the Commanders need to upgrade beyond Terry McLaurin at the wide receiver position. Their second leading receiver this past year was, I believe, Olamide Zaccheaus. And not that he can't be a good NFL player, but you can easily upgrade the wide receiver position. Now, another caveat here is they could go into free agency and do that, but if you can get Matthew Golden at number 29, I mean, that's great value. And he fits perfectly in this spread offense. He's got versatility to play slot and outside. We talked about that last episode. You can move him around. He's one of the more polished route runners in this draft. The catch radius is unbelievable. He's even drawn comparisons to Odell Beckham. The ball tracking. He's a very complete wide receiver. I think he has a chance to be possibly the best wide receiver from this draft class, believe it or not. And just arming Jaden Daniels with more firepower on a rookie deal. You don't have to pay $20 million to Cooper Kupp. You don't have to go out and spend tons of money on, the wide receiver position. You can allocate that elsewhere, possibly on your offensive line or your defense. Maybe acquiring like a Myles Garrett, who knows. I would try to beef up on wide receiver in the draft. I don't know if they're planning on doing something there in free agency. Maybe they do both, and that would be great. But I love this pick as well. I think it fits perfectly. Another toy for Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels.
Yeah,
what could go wrong?
Exactly.
We had the conversation last episode on what other Longhorns could potentially go in the first round. We will continue to do this on our weekly episodes of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports if mock drafts have come out, to react to the different destinations that these draft pundits have the Longhorns falling. But the consensus theme here seems to be, if there's 3 Longhorns going in the first round, it's going to be Kelvin Banks, Jahdae Barron, and most likely Matthew Golden. That seems to be the trend here. And I have a note on Cam Williams and his draft stock that we're going to get to here in a second with some team intel. But that seems to be the overall consensus here in late February. Any other comments on Jahdae Barron, Matthew Golden, Kelvin Banks, any other of these Longhorns that you want to address before we get to this team off-season inside scoop?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, we have a couple notes here. I think you'll find some of them probably interesting. I'll ask you. We'll play kind of roulette here. You can pick. You want the Arch Manning stuff? You want the C.J. Baxter stuff? You want the Cam Williams stuff? You want the Jalen Gilbo
let's
stuff?
hear about
what do you
C.J.
want first?
Baxter first.
Okay. Well, this probably lead us into the running backs coach conversation and what's happening in the running back room overall. But here's the latest update on C.J. Baxter. People have to remember that it wasn't just a normal ACL tear last August in fall camp that C.J. Baxter suffered in one of the scrimmages, and he had to have surgery. He had damage done to both his LCL and his PCL. His lateral collateral ligament, I think it's called, and his posterior ligament. Lots of damage done to the knee. Basically what you need to know is this is a lot worse than a lot of people think. I think a lot of Texas fans probably just assume this is an ACL, and we're going to see C.J. Baxter back at close to full strength at the beginning of the season against Ohio State. He's going to be probably ready to go then, or if he's not ready to go then, he'll be ready early on in the season. And even if he's not 100%, he'll get some carries. What I heard Thursday night is I wouldn't be so sure about that because of the severity of his injury. Um, he's not going to participate in whatever spring practice the Longhorns have. They're going to be moving it more to like an NFL OTA style of practice, of like spring camp. I don't know the schedule for that yet. Sark hasn't come out and released it, but he did say they're not holding a spring game. Some people aren't so happy about that. Some people really don't care all that much. I'm kind of in between. But the update here is one team source says that CJ Baxter might not, there's a chance he might not even be ready until like the middle of the 2025 season. Meaning like OU, like the middle of the season. Because this injury just was, there's a lot more to it than just like an ACL tear, if that makes sense. So that begs the question, with a new running backs coach, with the fact that Jaden Blue declared for the NFL draft, when I think the coaching staff thought he would be a guy that possibly come back. Given there is a new running backs coach here in Chad Scott from West Virginia, will the Longhorns' stance potentially change on taking a running back in the portal in the spring window? Because Tashard Choice's whole thing was, no, I'm not doing that. I draft, or I recruit and I develop. I'm not going, I believe in the guys that I recruited. We're not, even with Jaden Blue gone, we believe in CJ Baxter. We believe in Trey Wisner. We believe in Jarrett Gibson. We believe in the guys we have in this room. But with Chad Scott coming in, again, long tenured running backs coach, we'll talk about him a little bit later. I wonder if their stance changes on that, given CJ Baxter might not even be ready till like middle of the season. What are your thoughts on
That's my
the
first
whole
time
situation?
hearing that he wouldn't be ready week one. That's very concerning. And honestly, I was already on board with bringing in something in terms of running back in the portal. But now even more so. I think it's a necessity now almost. Because you cannot go into this season expecting Baxter to, like, just in every single scenario, get back to full health, get back to what he was. Because even at what he was a guy that needed to develop. He was a true freshman at that point. He needed to, develop his contact balance, develop his vision. So in order to get the high-level play that we need at running back, I think we got to get someone in the transfer portal so that we can actually have patience with a guy like C.J. Baxter and a guy like Jared Gibson and Christian Clark and all those guys.
I think here's what I'll say. Not going to give away too much, but with Chad Scott coming over from West Virginia, when Neil Brown was fired from the West Virginia job and they hired Rich Rodriguez, Chad Scott was the only coach they retained on their staff. And the reason they only retained Chad Scott, their running backs coach, who had been at West Virginia since 2019 and has been tons of other places, very experienced as a running backs coach. In fact, Chad Scott actually has experience also as an offensive coordinator, but we're not talking about that right now. The reason they retained Chad Scott is because their freshman All-American running back, his name is Jahdae White, ran for almost 900 yards this past season in his freshman year. West Virginia had like a top 30 rushing offense. Jahdae White was going to leave in the portal if Chad Scott departed or wasn't retained. Now Chad Scott is at Texas. What I heard on Thursday was that while there's nothing definitive yet, Chat's Jaheim White will be a name to watch in the spring portal. That's going to be something to really watch in the spring portal. That's all I'll say. If Texas gets Jaheim White, he will instantly become the best running back on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about him, but that sounds like the exact kind of guy we need. 3 years of eligibility,
Yeah.
and already has a full season of experience under his belt.
And he's not making much in NIL money at West Virginia. So you get to come to Austin, play in the SEC, and get a significant pay raise, because it won't come cheap to get that guy. There will be competition to get that guy if he enters the portal. Let's just say that. All right, that's the running back situation. We'll get to Chad Scott more at the end of the show. Let's do the other bad news, I guess you could call it. Cam Williams, who we talked about potentially being a first-round draft pick earlier on in the season. This person who I listened to on a Texas team site, basically a team insider, reached out to a couple of his NFL sources. And the sense around the league right now, to put it simply, is Cam Williams being drafted in the first round is out of the question. It's not going to happen. I think we probably already knew that. But the sense around the league is the tape, especially at the end of the season, was not pleasant for a lot of these NFL teams. And we already kind of know the group of NFL tackles we expect to go in the first round. It is a deeper tackle class, especially at the top. You have Kelvin Banks. You have Will Campbell. You have Armand Minbu. You've got
Connerly.
Josh Simmons out of Ohio State. Josh Connerly out of Oregon. There are those guys that I think are getting most of the buzz going in the first round. Cam Williams is very talented, but the sense around the league, kind of consensus sense around the league, is he's not going in the first round. You can pretty much write it down. Do you have any reaction to that?
Well, I'll throw a question back at you. Do you think he would have been able to help that narrative by going to the Senior Bowl or one of these other draft events? Because I just think, like, getting his measurables out there may have been beneficial. Like, they take the measurements of these guys, the wingspan, all that kind of stuff, height. And once these NFL teams just see how giant of a human he is, I mean...
Yeah, it probably would have. As talented as he is, as big as he is, that probably would have helped. But I still believe, like, the tape at the end of the season showed a guy who was still in his first season starting at the college level. And there's some consistency kinks in his game that will need to be worked on. And I don't know that NFL teams at the back half of the first round, especially if that's where he's going to end up, probably where he would go if he snuck into the first round, are going to be able to get past some of the bad tape that we saw at the end of last season. It's kind of like, what have you done for me lately? And just from what I'm hearing, I don't know that that's going to be possible. But if he goes to the Combine, if he really impresses at Texas Pro Day, if his height and weight, like if he's not overweight, which I think will be important for him, there's a chance I think he can definitely go second round, because teams need tackles. He's just not going to be first round like we thought he might be a couple of months ago. So that's that. Any other thoughts on Cam Williams? or anyone else
No.
before we get to the last two notes here? All right, let's talk about some more positive things. Source inside the program from team sources, Jalen Gilbo has been a big talking point this offseason. He's getting what team sources are calling the Jahdae Barron treatment from a year ago. What does that mean? Well, the staff truly thinks that Jalen Gilbo, amongst everybody in this secondary, is the guy poised for a big breakout in 2025. Does that mean he's going to get looks at outside corner, like Jahdae Barron got looks at outside corner a year ago? Let's just say they're not ruling that out, and they will look into that. He could possibly compete with Kobe Black out there. He could possibly get some reps at outside corner. They want to try to get his name out there prior to the season. But I'm hearing a lot of good things on Jalen Gilbo. He's really talented. And he's the guy that, when asked by team insiders, was highlighted as a guy that they thought is going to be poised for not only a big spring, but a big season. He's kind of getting the Jahdae Barron treatment from last year. We'll see what that ends up being. But hearing a lot of good things on Jalen Gilbo, which I think bodes well for the secondary being top-notch again in 2025.
Yeah,
Any
I
thoughts
was
on that?
impressed by Jalen Gilbo last year. I thought that little, what was it? I think he missed like the second half of one of those playoff games, if I'm not mistaken. You could feel his presence not being there because he's such a sure tackler. And that's why I'm kind of thinking, if he moves outside, are you taking away from, his impact on the game that he can have by moving him away from the ball? Because I think one of the keys here is, like, if you have him at nickel, he can make such a big impact on the running game in his run fits because he's such a good tackler and he's so smart. So I think that's a question the Texas staff has to ask themselves. Like, if we move him to outside, who's going to be in that slot spot, and can they do the things that Jalen Gilbo was able to do?
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think Texas believes that the way that they've recruited, they have other guys that can fill in at nickel. Warren Roberson is a highly recruited sophomore. They've got tons of others. Santana Wilson, who has NFL bloodlines. Like, they've got depth in the secondary. It's just not experienced depth in the secondary. But it's talented depth. I don't know you'll see Jalen Gilbo make a full transition to outside corner because they want Kobe Black to play. But he's gonna get some looks at different spots in the defense, I think, and they're treating him like they did Jahdae Barron, which is saying something because not everybody gets the Jahdae Barron treatment.
And Sark was even
and that
saying,
guy won
like,
the Thorpe Award
in Barron's sophomore season, he trains like a pro, and we ask a lot of him, and he delivers. So if they think Gilbo is doing all of those things, then you're looking at a guy that could be a first-round pick next spring.
Yep. Speaking of first-round picks, maybe the number one overall pick in one of these coming drafts, Arch Manning. Quick note on Arch for you guys. He's performed well during winter conditioning. The staff has really pushed him outside of his comfort zone. I don't know the details on what exactly that means, but they're trying to get him ready for game one, and I think it's 189 days at Ohio State. Quite the opening game for Texas at the defending national champions. They pushed him beyond his comfort zone, and they're thrilled with his performance. He's been described as a monster during team workouts. He has the Red Bull NIL deal now. I don't know if you saw the sit down he did with
I saw bits of it.
Marty
Yeah.
Smith, I think of ESPN. Yeah. Um, More so than anything else related to like his performance and team workouts, because I expect Arch to perform well there. Sark mentioned on the Kay Adams show on Thursday when he announced the spring game news that Arch works harder than anyone on the team, studies harder than anyone on the team. He's just kind of a workaholic. I believe him. Um, Josh Pate talked about this on his Thursday show. Lots of fans, not Texas fans, are already kind of starting to hate Arch Manning because of they cite the constant like attention that he's getting despite barely even playing so far in his college career. I've got news for Aggies out there, Sooners out there, everyone else that is already kind of getting tired of
Oh my gosh.
getting Arch Manning fatigue, if you will. I've got news for you guys. We haven't even scraped the tip of the iceberg in terms of hype around Arch Manning. Not even close to what it's going to be. If he goes into Columbus in 189 days on the opening Saturday of college football, and he throws for 3 touchdowns and rushes for another touchdown and Texas wins, duck and cover if you're a Arch Manning hater, because that's going to be, I guarantee it'll be the number one story on SportsCenter. It'll be the number one story on ESPN. We haven't even scraped the tip of the iceberg. So if you're already getting tired of it now, I don't know what to tell you. That's kind of my whole thing on Arch Manning.
Pretty self-explanatory. I mean, get ready for it for the next 20 years. I mean, boo-hoo. Womp womp.
Yeah, exactly. If he was Arch Smith, if he was Arch whatever last name, probably doesn't get this kind of attention, but some people want to act like he only gets the attention because of his last name. And that's just kind of like the stupidest argument I've ever heard. But like, yeah, of course he gets attention because his last name is fucking
What are we
Manning.
doing?
That means something. Have you watched the NFL the past 20 years? Do you know about Eli Manning? Do you know about Peyton Manning? Do you know about Archie Manning? Like Cooper Manning? This is it is NFL royalty. Like they are the royal quarterback family. That's that. Like it's the Manning family. Of course he's gonna get attention. So I don't know. We're not gonna ramble too much longer on that. But any other questions or thoughts on the Longhorns before we get to our last little segment here?
No.
All right. So Texas is taking full advantage of a new rule in college football, which basically says you can hire as many on-field coaches as you want. And with the resources that Texas has, Sark is like, okay, I'm going to hire a nickels coach, a nickel corners coach. I'm going to hire a running backs coach. I'm going to hire an assistant running backs coach. I'm going to hire an edge coach. I'm going to hire every possible coach that I can hire. I'm going to hire a retention strategist coach who specializes in just recruiting the team and making sure that we don't lose guys to the portal, that we're keeping the guys that we want to keep. That's a real thing. Texas has a retention strategist now on their staff. A guy specifically dedicated towards keeping guys on the roster, making sure they do not leave for the portal. He is going all out, hiring all sorts of kinds of coaches. But the big story here is Blake Gideon left for the Georgia Tech defensive coordinator job.
Yeah.
Great job for him, by the way. Georgia Tech, I think, is kind of an up and coming ACC program. There's tier 1 in the ACC, which I think is Clemson. You maybe can put Miami in there. Maybe Florida State. But I think it's Clemson and probably Miami. I don't know you put Florida State there anymore, given
I think I would put them there just
their
because of the
past
recruiting.
season.
But
Probably so. But my point is, in tier 2, I don't know that I put anyone else above
no.
Georgia Tech. So that's a great job for him. Good for him. I'm happy for him. Did a lot of good stuff at Texas. What he's done the past couple years, recruiting the safety room in particular, with Xavier Filsaime, Jonah Williams, Zealous Hicks, even a guy like Derek Williams, who missed this past season but will be back next year. It's very impressive. So Texas has had to rearrange their secondaries coach, how they rearranged that. They hired Mark Orphey, who was the defensive backs coach at Rutgers. He comes over from Rutgers. He will be the new cornerbacks coach, and they've moved Terry Joseph to passing game coordinator / safeties coach. So Terry Joseph, who was the cornerbacks coach, is now defensive passing game coordinator and safeties coach, and Mark Orphey is now cornerbacks coach. This is kind of a off the radar, out of the box hire. My quick thoughts on it are, I started to give Sark the benefit of the doubt for these out of box hires, because it seems that every time he goes out and hires someone that does not appear to be on Longhorn fan lists of the coaches they want, it works out. He seems to have his inner circle of guys that he knows, that he wants, and he seems to like certain things in certain coaches. He looks for certain things in certain position coaches. A couple notes on Mark Orphey. Number one, he graduated from a high school in the Houston area called North Shore. Tons of NFL, like Power 5 recruits come out of North Shore High School, especially in the secondary. Texas hasn't had very much success recruiting that high school, even as well as they've recruited the past couple of years. They haven't really been able to pull anyone from North Shore. Mark Orphey has connections to North Shore. That box is checked. They want to try to extend into the Houston area. They haven't had much success there, outside of pulling Jonah Williams from Galveston Ball. Number two, Mark Orphey, before he was cornerbacks coach at Rutgers, was an analyst on the staff with, guess who? Nick Saban, who endorsed Mark Orphey to coach Sark. Nick Saban. That matters. If Nick Saban's talking about Mark Orphey and how he's an up-and-coming, guy in the industry, I'll trust it. And he's coached NFL talent. I can't list you the names, but he's developed and coached NFL talent at his previous stops. I'm not going to be here and be the guy to give assistant coach hiring grades. It's just not, I don't think, something that's worth my time. But I do like the fact that he has connections in certain areas, particularly the Northeast, which is not somewhere Texas recruits a lot, but there are some elite players that they might want to go after. And particularly the North Shore High School, which is talent-rich at basically every position. They want to start to plant a flag there. And he's endorsed by Nick Saban, so I don't really give a shit what anyone else says. And then the running backs coach, Chad Scott, who I already kind of mentioned earlier, with Shard Choice leaving, they bring in a young guy in Chad Scott who's 43 years old, has been the running backs coach at West Virginia since 2019. And each of the past 2 years, West Virginia has had a better run game than Texas has. Even when they were in the Big 12, West Virginia had a better run game than Texas. I'm hoping that he can bring new ideas to short yardage, help Sark in that respect, because he has been an offensive coordinator, both at West Virginia and some other places. He's a guy that played college football at, I believe, North Carolina and one other place. And I think he had a short stint in the NFL, but he's young, relatable, exactly what you look for in a good position coach, exactly what Sark looks for in a good position coach. And get this, he's from the state of Florida. What has Texas done the past couple of years at the running back position? 2023, they go into the state of Florida. Who do they get? C.J. Baxter. 2024, they go into the state of Florida. Who do they get? Jarrett Gibson. That's been where they've basically done a lot of their heavy lifting at the running back position in the past couple of recruiting cycles. And Chad Gibson, where the fuck did I get that name from? Chad Scott, he's got 2 first names. He has connections there. He's got connections in North Carolina because he played there. He's got connections, in Texas. He was a former assistant at Texas Tech, running backs coach there. He's been a running backs coach everywhere. He checks a lot of the boxes, specifically that he's from Florida, and Texas loves to recruit that area. But he's young, energetic, kind of has a not the exact same personality to Tashard Choice, but I think he'll do a great job. And hopefully he can fix some of the fumbling issues that we saw last year at the running back position. So, while these are kind of out-of-the-box hires, they're not the names that you might want. I give Sark the benefit of the doubt because he went to the NFL last year and he got the assistant defensive lines coach from the Miami Dolphins that nobody and their mom knew about before Texas put him on the map. Kenny Baker, the new defensive line coach, that replaced Bo Davis when he left for LSU. What did Kenny Baker do in his first year at Texas? He developed Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins into more consistent contributors. Those guys are probably going to be day 2 draft picks. At least Alfred Collins will be. And, he pulled Justice Terry, a 5-star out of the state of Georgia. Pulled him from the grasp of Kirby Smart. That's not easy to do. So he's now proven as a guy. Once Brendan Marion left a couple years ago, they went to the NFL and they got the wide receivers coach, Chris Jackson. He's been really good so far. His first year on the job, he pulls Ryan Wingo out of the state of Missouri. This past year, look at what he did recruiting the wide receiver position. Khalil Lockett, Jamie French. They missed on Decorian Moore, but they got those 2 5-stars and Dalen McCutcheon, along with Michael Terry. These aren't the names that you might know, but they're names that Sark believes in, and so far they're working out. So who am I to doubt the hires of Chad Scott and Mark Orphey to replace Blake Gideon and Tashard Choice? Any thoughts on all that?
The thought that popped in my head was a good future segment maybe could be me asking you to rank the assistant coaches based on recruiting acumen, maybe offensive and defensive, like a separate ranking, like a top 5 or something like that.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that over the next couple weeks. I like that idea. But overall, we're not going to go through every single coach that was hired, but maybe we will over the course of the next couple months. But Those are the two main ones. Texas has a new running backs coach and a new cornerbacks coach. And what I can tell you is another NFL team tried to poach Torrey Becton, who's the strength and conditioning coach at Texas. But luckily, with a raise, Texas was able to keep him. These NFL teams, man, I don't know what the thing is with, this Texas coaching staff in the NFL all of a sudden, but they're trying to, they're coming for Sark and his staff. But that's a good thing. That's the sign of a healthy, good program. Because Kirby Smart deals with the same damn thing. Even a guy like Marcus Freeman deals with the same thing. What happened this past hiring cycle or this offseason? Al Golden, who won the Broyles Award for the best assistant coach in college football this past year, their defensive coordinator, got the Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator job. We talked about it last episode. So all these other programs that are Ohio State deals with the same thing, right? I mean, it's just part of being an elite program in college football is teams are going to come for your coaches. But one of the funny things in the Longhorn community over the past couple of days since Tashara Choice left, I guess the past week or so, is a conspiracy that Dan Campbell, who is an Aggie, is trying to raid Texas's coaching staff because he's an Aggie. And Aggie, Longhorn, that kind of thing. I don't buy into all that, but I don't know. Maybe something behind that. And good hire for him, by the way. Like, you pull Tashard Choice to coach a guy he already knows, and Jahmyr Gibbs. That's about as good as you can get for both sides. Any other parting shots on the Longhorns or anything else? I decided we should record this weekend, get it out of the way, so that the path is clear for our Tuesday episode where we'll get into the combine, we'll get into a bunch of other stuff, including our weekly segment on Longhorn recruiting. Anything else, though, for this episode?
Yeah, I just want to say that
Longhorn Sports.
This is the time of year where people kind of expect news to slow down, and it's not going to. Like, this is still, this is still going to be new, fresh stuff every single week on our show. So,
it's going to be new, fresh stuff every single week.
Yeah.
Until at least after the draft. After the draft, things might slow down a little bit because then we go into the summer. And unless there's like the remnants of free agency or some trades that happen in the NFL, I don't know that there's going to be much new news. But for the next 2 to 3 months, it's jam-packed. We've got spring football, even though we're not getting a spring game. We've got recruiting. We've got NFL draft, which will be the bulk of our content. And I think I've gotten some feedback, Emmy, on our last episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. And people like the format of reacting to mock drafts. They really like that. So I think we're going to keep doing that. We'll continue to do big boards. The combine isn't until Thursday. It's like Thursday to Sunday. I think Thursday is like defensive
Saturday's
line
the big day. Quarterbacks,
edge,
running backs,
I believe.
wide receivers.
Yep. So on this week's episode, we're going to do some kind of NFL Combine preview. Maybe we'll do lists like top 3 most intriguing players we're watching on offense and defense or something like that. We'll do something. We might even, if a new mock draft comes out between now and then, we might even react to that some. In fact, Emmy, if you want to, I still won't show it, but we can do reactions to more of Todd McShay's mock draft on Tuesday if you want. And then we'll do some more gut check. So keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for more Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. over the next couple weeks. But for today's episode, that is going to do it. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Make sure you check out all the rest of our content on our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We greatly appreciate it. Go ahead and check out our Patreon. We put content on there occasionally, but our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts is the place to be, because we've got Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports and we've got our football content. It's all football. All football.
New logo too
on this podcast. So, a new logo too, which has kind of debuted on our social media, but definitely has debuted on our YouTube channel. So go check that out. But for Emmy Nixon, at Emmy_Nixon on Twitter, and for Michael Wein, at Michael_Wein1 on X, this has been Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Hook 'em. Peace out.